What did your crush do that completely ruined your infatuation for them? 1. Got arrested for being a child molester, no previous signs. Yeah, that'll definitely do it. 2. We had been going out for a few weeks, and on the way home from a party, we went to get McDonald's and he paid for me. I have an allergy and they got my order wrong. I asked and it wasn't a problem. They made me a new burger and told me to keep the incorrect one as they couldn't resell it. I offered it to him. He didn't want it, so I said I would just bring it home to give to my housemate so it wouldn't go to waste. He was completely fine with this. Then a homeless guy came in and started asking at the tables for change. I offered him the burger and he took it. My date went crazy at me for giving away the burger that he had paid for, even though he was okay with me giving it to my housemate, and followed the homeless man, shouting at him to give it back. Then got the guy kicked out of the restaurant. It was terrifying. Went from easygoing and charming to furious in a split second. And when he sat down again, he acted like everything was normal and asked me if I wanted to go home with him. It was a side of him I hadn't seen before. I'm glad he showed his true colors early. 3. This post made me remember a really hurtful one. When I was 17, at my first year at uni, I made friends with a girl in my year. It wasn't like an instant crush, but she was funny and I grew to like her. One day we were going home after classes together. Turns out we lived pretty close to each other, chatting and joking. And at one moment she says, "I really like talking to you just about anything. I would have jumped you right now if you weren't so ugly." I was a really awkward teenager, severely underweight, skin problems and some other complexes. On top of that, very introverted, so it outright killed my self-esteem. Thing is that she actually didn't realize the facts of her words. It was like a passing comment to her and wasn't said with malicious intent. That fact actually made these words even more hurtful. 4. She mentioned her last name. I recognized it. Haha. It's probably a good thing. Found out her grandmother was my grandfather's older sister. It worked out okay. We were on a double date sort of deal with her friend and my friend. We found that out pretty early in the night. We literally laughed our asses off for 15 minutes, making incest jokes and traded dates. I ended up dating her friend for about 4 years. 5. She came over to my house, saw my full bookshelf, and went on a long rant about how reading and books were all pointless. Not just the books I picked, which maybe I could have been fine with as opinions differ, but every single book was worthless and I was wasting my time reading. It was a really new relationship and I broke up with her then and there. "God, you're really breaking up with me over books?" Linen said absolutely. 6. Turns out she had absolutely no filter. She took pride in saying what was on her mind, which was kind of cute at first, until I realized that she literally meant it. Every thought in her head spewed out of her mouth no matter who could hear it. Not a day went by where she didn't get into an argument with someone over some insensitive or insulting comment that she made. She was the female embodiment of Larry David and Curb Your Enthusiasm. 7. I figured out he was dating me and 2 other girls and playing each other against us. One night at a party, one of the other girls wanted to fight. Honestly, I was drunk and tired, and was getting in my friend's car to leave when she tried to start a fight with me over him. I just said, "Tell your friends we got in a fight and you won. Also, you can have him." I got in the car and went home to bed. That was the day I decided I would never fight over a guy. If he wants to be with me, he will be with me. 8. Told me she likes me back and asked for my number, led me on for months. Had all her friends there every time we wrote. Eventually the whole class was in on it. Nobody told me because I had no friends. Teachers knew about it, but didn't want to get involved because it was a school for snobs and my parents were the only poor ones. My sister was in school too, but she didn't want to get bullied, so she kept her head down. Led me on for half a year. Told me I'm a sweet guy. Made me spend hundreds in SMS costs while I was a teenager. Made me get yelled at by my abusive parents because I couldn't give up texting to the one person who liked me. Invited me to the beach for a date after I told her I hated beaches. I sat there for about 4 hours with flowers in hand. I knew it was all over after half an hour, but I just couldn't go home knowing I'd been made a fool of. I left that school. I made bad choices. Then I made good choices. Now I'm married to someone who actually likes me. Hurt like hell. Made me a better man though. 9. Started seeing a girl somewhat recently that works in the same industry as I do, and hadn't dated in some time. Initially, there were no red flags at all, and things were going great. Felt like everything in life was breaking my way for once. Fast forward to a few months later, and completely out of nowhere she accuses me of hacking into her devices. She then thinks that a speaker that I gave her when I was cleaning out some of my old stuff was listening in on her. I realize she has some serious paranoid delusions and mental health issues. I take this into account and choose to still be friends with her because I know she needs some good people in her life. I know she can't help the way she is, and I really don't want to just cut her off because of mental health issues she can't control. Fast forward to a few days ago, and I get a call from the local police that she reported me for stalking, breaking and entering, and cyber harassment. I have literally not been to her apartment in several weeks at this point. So, I explain the situation to the officer that called me, and tell them she needs to seek some mental health treatment. I haven't made an attempt to contact her since, and will be filing a restraining order against her if she continues to try to disrupt my life. I hope she gets the help she needs, but when you're dealing with someone who is legit crazy, and that doesn't have a solid support network, that is usually not the case. 10. This might sound dumb, but I was dating someone briefly several years ago that I had a red flag moment and walked away. We had only gone on a few dates and hadn't become intimate yet. He came to my house when I had just bought my first car, and he sat on the hood. I asked him not to do that, and he just left. After a few more times asking and him blatantly ignoring me and mocking me, I dropped him. If he couldn't even manage respecting such a small boundary, I wasn't interested in giving him a chance not to respect others. Not a dumb move. Very smart. He also may have been testing to see if you'd let him push your boundaries. You probably dodged a bullet. Imho. He told you who he was. You believed him. I have to say, if there's one thing I've learned in relationships, is that you really need to watch for people who push boundaries. It takes a few forms, saying that even though they recognize the reasons for your boundary, they should be the exception because they're different. All that says to me is that they don't understand why I have that boundary and value their own wants needs over my comfort. Slipping up and violating stated boundaries repeatedly. It shows they have poor impulse control or just really care more about their own needs. Pouting when you set boundaries or punishing you by withholding affection. Blaming you for ruining the mood situation when you remind them that they're violating a previously voiced boundary. A lot of these are common in relationships when you are younger, but it's important to make the importance of respecting boundaries clear early on, both for yourself and your partner. If you get your boundaries trampled, you end up unhappy and resentful. When they get away with it, they learn that their behavior is acceptable if they can figure out a way to manipulate you into accepting it. That means they don't grow as a person. 11. During lunch at school one day, she asked for my help in putting on a necklace. She couldn't latch the clasp onto the chain. As I was in the middle of securing the clasp, she shouted out for the whole room to hear, "EWW, Haru 24, get your disgusting hands off of me. What are you doing?" Never lost interest in someone so fast in my life. 12. Had this guy I had been crushing on for years. Flirted with him every time I saw him. Pretty much made it really clear I was interested. He flirted back enough that I figured sooner or later he would ask me out. No. Instead, he asked me if I thought my sister liked him, and if I would give him her phone number. Proceeded to make a comment about how hot my sister still was for a woman over 40, with 4 kids. She's a widow. Which made it pretty clear to me that he wasn't attracted to me at all. Cried over it for days, then realized he wasn't worth it, and that was the end of it. Must admit I was glad my sister wasn't interested in him though. It would have been hard to deal with had she ended up getting involved with him. 13. We had made plans for Halloween. We were supposed to go to a club and meet some friends. She ended up saying she was sick and stayed home. About a week later, I'm going to drop her off at her house, and she told me what she really did on Halloween. She went to a different club with her friends, not ours. There was plenty of other issues in the relationship, but that one truth is what made me snap. I just dropped her off without saying anything, and a few days later broke up with her. I don't think she even cheated, just too much lying and manipulation. 14. She invited the entire class except me and another kid to her birthday party, and then publicly stated, "Yeah, I just don't know you that well," as excuse when she realized we found out. This was after we had been in the same class since kindergarten. Her brother was a good friend, etc. Later, through a mutual friend. I found out one of the cool kids hated me, so she decided to not invite me. That was quite rough to go through as 13 to 14-year-old. During my college years, I had a more interesting experience. Extremely pretty girl that I had a crush on and got along with extremely well decided to try to get me completely shit-faced by constantly pouring drinks in my glass. Was at her place, and being a 21-year-old, you just let her do so, seeing where it goes. Turns out she wanted to interrogate me about a friend to see if he liked her. Worst hangover ever the day after. My hopes crushed, and to this day they're still married. So I guess at least 2 people are happy after that night. But I ain't one of them. 15. This is a public statement of how stupid I am, but it's time to tell this story. I was 18, and there was this guy who was 4 years older who was very into me. I was into him as well. We met months before, but we never really talked because he was seeing someone. When they broke things off, he texted me on Instagram. We started talking and he asked me to go to the movie theater together. I asked him when and he said quando vuoi tu. A tua discretion, which means whenever you want, at your discretion. I had a past full of older guys trying to hide me from the outside world because they thought I was too young, and I thought that at your discretion meant be discreet. I didn't want to deal with that bullshit anymore, so I completely ghosted him. I found out what at your discretion actually meant just 4 years after. I remember I felt so bad that I reached out to him and told him the whole story. He laughed it off and said it was no big deal. I still feel like a complete idiot when I think about it.